Hi there! Who is ready to factor a simple trinomial? I'm sure you all are. You're very excited, I know. Okay, so you were supposed to have done some work before playing this video, which was part A and part B of this page here. So if you have not completed part A and part B on the sheet titled Factoring a Simple Trinomial, please complete that because as you can see here, you don't play the video until the second page. So if you have not completed this page, please press pause on the video, finish the page, and then you can continue. So press pause now if you have not done the work. Okay, so in part A, you were asked to expand and simplify each of the following, which means using FOIL because you have two binomials being multiplied. So if you remember FOIL, you multiply the two first terms together, then you multiply the two outside terms together, then you multiply the two inside terms together, then you multiply the two outside terms together. So that's FOIL, which is just basically using the distributive law twice and then collecting like terms. So if this is the question and this is the answer, then you are expanding and simplifying using FOIL. Now FOIL is just an acronym, it's not like a real math word. Then you are asked to fill out this table. And in the first section, you are asked to put both numbers from the question into the chart here. So the value of m and the value of n are the two numbers in the brackets. Then you are asked to put the two numbers from the answer into the table. So it's the linear term coefficient and the constant term coefficient. And the question was, what is the relationship between m, n, and b? Well, if you take the m and n and you add them, you get b. So 3 plus 2 is 5. Negative 1 plus negative 4 is negative 5. 4 plus negative 3 is 1. Negative 2 plus 5 is 3. What is the relationship between m, n, and c? Well, m times n equals c. So 3 times 2 equals 6. Negative 4 times negative 1 equals 4. 4 times negative 3 equals 12. Negative 2 times 5 equals negative 10. That all comes from this foiling process. The L part of the FOIL, that's where you get the C term, and that's where you have the M times N. The O and the I is where you get the linear term B because you are taking this coefficient of 2 and this coefficient of 3, and then you are adding those to get that B term. So that's how your question is related to your answer. What you're going to be learning today is how to factor this. So now, what if this was the question and this was the answer? So if this was the question and you wanted to put it into these two brackets, what we're doing to factor this simple trinomial is to undo the FOIL process. And because the m and n add to give you this number, and the m and n multiply to give you this number, you would have to look for two numbers that multiplied to give you 6 and added to give you 5. There would only ever be one combination of numbers that would add to 5 and multiply to 6. So let's look at this in more detail. Okay, so the process of reversing the foiling process is called trinomial factoring. Now there are two types of trinomials. There are simple trinomials and tricky trinomials. Some people call tricky complex trinomials. Today we will just be factoring the simple trinomials. They don't call them simple and tricky for no reason, people, so realize that. A simple trinomial has three terms, and that's why you get the idea of tri, like tricycle, triceps. Tri means three terms. A trinomial means three terms. So the first term is your quadratic term. and that quadratic term has an x squared. Your second term is your linear. So your linear term has an x in it, and the third term is the constant. And a constant has no x, so we just use the letter C to represent the number that is the constant. The coefficient of the linear term we call b, and with a simple trinomial, the coefficient of the quadratic term is 1. Now, in a trinomial, we usually write a as the coefficient of the quadratic term. So if a is equal to 1, that's a simple trinomial. If a is some number other than 1, that's what makes it a tricky trinomial, and that's what we'll be looking at starting next day. So again, in order to factor a simple trinomial, which means taking it from what used to be the answer that was simplified and taking it into what is a factored form, you have to look for two numbers that multiply to give you the c value and add to give you the b value. And those will give you the two values that go in the brackets of m and n. So m plus n equals b, m times n equals c. All right, so here we go. If we're going to factor this, remember, the two numbers, m and n, have to multiply to give you -6, and they have to add to give you this coefficient, which is 1. Now, this is the easiest way to do it. The first thing you do is find two numbers that multiply to give you -6. It's easier to find the two numbers that multiply to give you -6 first because there are only a limited number of pairs that will make -6. If you're trying to find the pairs that add to give you +1, that would be an infinite number of pairs, but there's only a certain number of pairs that would multiply to give you -6. They are 1 and -6, 2 and -3, -1 and 6, -2 and 3. This step, you can either write it down on paper or you can do it in your head, whichever is easier for you. Now that you've written down all of the numbers that multiply to give you -6, that's one of the reasons why we give you that sheet on the day of the test to practice with your factors. You're going to find the one pair that adds to 1. So, which one of these pairs adds to 1? It is this one, of course. So this is the only pair of numbers that would add to give you 1 and multiply to give you -6. So that's your value of m, and that's your value of n. It doesn't matter which one goes where. This could have been m and this could have been n. It doesn't matter. Then to write your final answer, you have your two sets of brackets. X will go in the beginning of each bracket. And at the end of each bracket, you put your m and your n. So your m goes here, and your n goes here. If you wanted to check your answer, doing this factoring is the opposite of FOIL. X times x is x squared. X times 3 is 3x. -2 times x is -2x. -2 times 3 is -6. And when you collect like terms, you get what you started with. Right? So this term comes from the f part of FOIL. The -6 comes from the L part of FOIL. And that middle term comes from adding these two terms, which is the O and the I part of FOIL. So adding to give you the middle number, multiplying to give you the end. So I'll just show you a few more examples and then we're going to give you some time to try some on your own. So in this case, what are two numbers that multiply to give you 27 and add to give you 12? Well, you could have 1 and 27. You could have 3 and 9. That's about it. Unless, of course, you did -1 and -27, -3 and -9, but they're not going to be these numbers because they have to add to give you +12. So it's going to be this pair right here. So that is your m and your n. So the first bracket is x plus 3, and your second bracket is x plus 9. Next example. What multiplies to give you -12 adds to give you +1? Well, that's 1 and -12, 2 and -6, 3 and -4, or you can have -1 and 12, -2 and 6, -3 and 4. Again, this part you can do in your head if you want. The pair that adds to +1 is this. So your answer is x minus 3, x plus 4. For the third example, hopefully you notice that this is not yet a simple trinomial because your a value is not equal to 1. But all of these numbers can be divided by 3, which means the first thing that we can do is common factor out a 3. So that's the greatest common factor of 3, and you are left with x squared minus 6x plus 9. Now inside here you have a simple trinomial. So what multiplies to 9 and adds to -6? Well, if it multiplies to +9, it's 1 and 9, or 3 and 3. But it has to add to -6, so really these numbers have to be negative, because don't forget, two negatives multiplied together also gives you a +9. So the ones that add to -6 are these ones. So that is x minus 3, x minus 3. And anytime the two brackets are the same, you're going to write it as x minus 3 squared. So that would be your final answer. So I'm going to get you to pause the video now, and you're going to try examples B, D, and F. Come back to the video and check your answer. Pause now, please. Okay, so thanks for coming back. Welcome to back to the video. And what I want you to do is to just take a second and check your answers. Few things that I will note is, remember that all of this work here where you're trying to figure out the values of m and n can be done in your head or on the paper. It doesn't matter. You can always ask for a scrap piece of paper if it's during a test or a quiz. Second thing I want you to remember is if a is not equal to 1, that means you're going to have to common factor it out. Third thing I want you to remember is if your two factors are the same, you have to write them as just the factor squared. And the last thing to remember is if you're going through the pairs, as soon as you find the pair that works, you don't have to keep trying you don't have to write down all the pairs if you find the one that works. So make note of any of these examples or anything else that we did today that you did not understand, and ask your teacher during the next class. Thanks, and I hope you enjoyed learning how to factor simple trinomials. Bye-bye.